Welcome to the Consummate Athlete Podcast, where we explore what it means to be a well-rounded, happy, goal-crushing athlete. Every week, myself, sports journalist Molly Herford, and cycling coach and kinesiologist Peter Glassford interview experts and chat through all of your training questions. We're excited to have you along for the ride. Hello. Welcome back to the Consummate Athlete Podcast Snow Day edition. Peter, how's it going?
It's going well. I mean, today's podcast is one of my favorite topics around cross-training, but yes, it is topical because there is a winter storm that has really gone across. I have people I coach down in Virginia. I think it's down in Texas. There's cold weather a lot of places right now, so hopefully you're doing okay with that and it hasn't been too disruptive, but our podcast today is around cross-training in ways that could help.
Yes, and again, one of our favorite topics. That's why we have the Cross Training is Not a Crime t-shirt available in the Consummate Athlete store. You can check that out at consummateathlete.com/shop. But I guess, Peter, I'm going to kick it to you, as we get into the hows and whys and all that jazz with cross training. But what have you been up to cross training wise lately?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's been tough because we moved to a house. We finally got a garage. We haven't had a garage this far in our marriage and athletic careers, which is
the fact that we've stayed married through that is impressive. But
I started asking more about getting squat racks and more bicycles, and so we had the discussion that this was the year. So we have this garage that we've sort of outfitted now, and we have a treadmill and the trainer and the rollers and that sort of stuff. I guess the squat rack as well. And so now it's very inviting to not go out into the cold and have to bundle up and do all these things. So I would say that my outdoor activity has actually been much lower this year than in past years.
It is funny. Yeah, I feel like since we got it, you're out there a lot more frequently. I'm less so. And I think that's the allure of the trainer versus the allure of the treadmill. I think we know a lot of people who love riding the trainer. They enjoy riding the trainer. It's almost as enjoyable as riding outside for some people. The treadmill, on the other hand, I don't know any runner that would say that they are equal as far as treadmill versus running outside. No one really likes the treadmill, and come at me if I'm wrong. If you're a diehard,
there's probably some people who and is maybe a strong word, but yeah, you're probably not wrong that there's people that will just ride indoors always. Those people certainly exist,
or just default to riding indoors as soon as it's
we have
slightly
people
bad.
Now who are only indoors for a variety of reasons, whether it's lifestyle or safety or other injuries.
Well, and honestly, the esport platforms for cycling are significantly better, right? They've tried. I think you can do Zwift for running. I think all of those exist, but I really don't know any runners that are really into that. I know cyclists who will get on the treadmill and use Zwift running, but I don't really know.
I actually think our friend Matt F., who was top 10 at the JFK, top 10, right? I think he was top 10. He had a fantastic run, has 3 really young kids, and I know I'm pretty sure he does do Zwift on the treadmill as well. But he'll also, to your point, most of the time he is out running, even just at nighttime once they get the kids down or whatever, they fit it in. But I think he probably wouldn't choose to run on Zwift if he had the option to not.
Yeah, and I mean, running also, you have the benefit of it's a lot easier to put on enough gear to be warm running outside versus riding outside. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you just have to put spikes on your shoes or little screws in the bottom of your shoes or whatever, and now you have traction on the ice. It's not always possible on the bike, or you need a dedicated fat bike with stud tires and all that jazz. So there is definitely a gear component, but all that to say, you've been on the trainer more. I've actually been outside a ton. I've only defaulted to the treadmill a couple times in the last couple weeks, yesterday included, because it wasn't even the snow. It was just so stinking cold out.
Right.
That I got outside and I left. I said goodbye. You're on the trainer, just powering away. I was totally dressed and I was all right, I'll see you later. And then I think maybe a minute later, I came storming back in and jumped on the treadmill. Mm-hmm. But we got to watch cyclocross together. That was nice.
Right. Yeah. And so maybe did you want to get into the study and why we're talking about this today?
Yeah. I mean, whether you read just the regular news or any kind of fitness news, health news, etc., you've probably seen this. The number of PR pitch emails I got that are it turns out exercise is good for you. Today,
what was the sales pitch for them?
Well, it's just everyone who has anyone who can speak about exercise as an expert.
I see.
They're just sending out these blanket, just like new study reveals exercise helps you live longer, which I guess is really the TLDR of this new study from Harvard. But
it is, but the difference is, I think, in the past we've been told you need to move more. There's sort of this like
150
minutes of exercise every week, which for the cycling community, I've done a couple of presentations this past winter, and I always start with actually those what we might call like governmental recommendations or just the basic sort of health things. And a lot of cyclists will roll their eyes, but when you actually read those recommendations, a lot of times it does encourage at least strength training, if not a variety of modes of exercise. And what this study, which came from the Harvard School of Harvard. Where is this here? I've lost this. From Harvard, anyhow. And what they did is they looked back at across a lot of data. And so this was the Nurses' Health Study, which is a common study that's pulled for some of these health-related population studies and sort of ways they look back and sort of try and find connections to things. So it took that one and another one, the Health Professionals Follow-Up Study. And they looked at sort of, rather than just looking at how much exercise people did, they looked back and they were able to look at the different types of exercise. So they were trying to say how much variety is in the exercise that these people are doing. And so what they found is even for people across different amounts of exercise, those who exercise just a little and those who exercised a lot, it still held that there was, they're saying, 19% decreased mortality. So the chances of dying, right? There was mortality? Yeah. Was decreased across. So irregardless of how much it was, the variety actually had this like effect of decreasing. And so you could guess at reasons. They do sort of like surmise and guess a bit at this during the study that maybe this engages you in more communities, which we've talked about a lot with our 4 Cs, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But also maybe there's like more resilience when you get injured or when it snows and you like, and your only mode is outdoor biking, and then suddenly that's not an option. You now have another option to walk or hike or snowshoe or ski or whatever, right? So maybe they're more resilient to disruptions in life via injury or lifestyle or time available. And then also I think just like the mental aspects of having to learn, like you could also guess that that's something that's protective against different causes of mortality, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, what does that mean for our audience?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think we need to be clear that this is not your FTP is going to go up because of variety necessarily, although it's something that we think is actually performance enhancing. What they're talking about is longevity. So they're sort of like this. We can talk about health. We can talk about longevity. We can talk about performance. But these are often similar, moving in the same direction. But not always, right? We know that sometimes elite sport can dip into things that aren't necessarily healthful or things that might spark longevity, right? There's ways to perform really well. I was just watching X Games on the weekend, and there's some people who are performing really well, doing double backflips on snowmobiles, but that may not be great from a longevity perspective, depending on how that snowmobile lands relative to your body, right? So we know that there's like some variables there as far as performance, what you're performing, and then versus the effects on your longevity. So we need to be careful with that and how far we go with that. But I think most of the people that we work with do want to have some sort of like eye towards health as well as a bit of performance.
Yeah. And I mean, we're seeing it across the North America right now with the snow we're getting. It's also just practical, right? Like, so for me, Saturday, I had 16 miles of running to do, and it was negative whatever Fahrenheit. As soon as you're in negatives in Fahrenheit, it's not a good situation. Being out there for 3 hours in the snow running would have sucked. I could have maybe done it, but it would have been really unpleasant. So instead, I did a brick. So I skied, and then I got off the skis and put on my running shoes and then went for the run. And it was so much better. And having that ability to do that, I think, honestly, felt more muscularly difficult. Mm-hmm. So I actually think at the end of the day, I got a better stimulus for the training that I'm actually doing.
Mm-hmm. And that's always the tricky thing when we're trying to come back to performance. You do have a bike race, say, or a running race you're going to do. If you go cross-country skiing, is there a transfer? Is there a benefit to that sport? And that's always the big question mark. If I run as a cyclist, is it better than doing nothing? Is it better than doing my cycling? And so there's sort of those two different questions, which are sort of different, right? If I just sit on the couch, you would assume that someone who runs is going to do better in a bike race. And I always sort of come back to that logic. So even if it's not a one-to-one versus trainer riding, if I can get out and do that, it increases my work capacity. Maybe it maybe gives me all the benefits of exercise as far as like mental, and we talk a lot about the 4 C's, which we can maybe tease. Does that make sense to tease those now? So the 4 C's that we talk about are cross training, confidence, consistency, and what's the other one? Community. And so they're sort of interchanging. I don't know if we have a great diagram for it, but it's sort of like by cross training, you might be able to be more consistent because you can train through maybe an injury or different conditions, or when you're traveling. We do work with a lot of busy people who are traveling every week of the year. Now, they can not access their indoor trainer pain cave at their home because they are not at their home. So now the question is, what do? Well, they can not do anything and just like go out drinking every night, or they can get into that hotel gym and do a treadmill walk or run, or they can do some strength training or go for a walk, or any variety of ways that you could solve that. And that's probably a better way to be consistent. And then what we say is that's going to build your confidence that you're staying consistent and feeling better when you get back on your bike. And then the other element is definitely this community element where you start accessing different groups of friends and support networks and different people, right? Like you're just meeting different people in the gym, then you're going to meet out on your local cycling club group ride. And so we've seen huge benefits with folks where they're like they have different people in their life. And when they're not able to go out on the cycling group ride because they're injured or it doesn't fit into life, they can still get into the gym and see people and talk to people, and that can be very supportive, right? And so a lot of those elements move beyond sport performance, but certainly support health, which then comes back, I think, and this is the happy athletes go faster, right? Like if you're supported in that way and you're feeling healthy, you're going to perform better. This is especially true for masters athletes, right? Where so much of it is related to that, like how much stress do you have going on in your life? Are you sleeping at night? That sort of thing, right?
Yeah. So now with this study in mind, what's sort of the practical implications for our cyclists out there, especially, let's say, the ones that very much are fans of cycling and that's it? I mean, we have talked ad nauseum on this podcast about adding strength training. Everyone who listens to this knows we love adding in walks that aren't necessarily counting as your exercise or being logged on anything. Although if you want to log them on Strava, I think just added dog walking as a activity.
To differentiate from
You know what? I think that is an important differentiator, given like the dog stopping to sniff and all that kind of stuff.
I guess it depends on your dog. Yeah, some of them could be almost runs, but
yeah,
that's interesting. Yeah, I tend to encourage people to more use Strava if they feel the need to do that, or just like a Garmin watch. Your activity tracker watches are going to track steps. So to me, walks can be tracked with steps probably better than. Maybe, put it into trainings, but every person's different. Again, this depends a bit on who you are. If you're very performance driven and you're really pushing the limits, you probably don't need to put that in there. But I do think watching the steps, I think it's the way you were going with this answer here is, where do we fit this other movement into a performance lifestyle or into our training?
Yeah, exactly. How do we account for it? Because I think we always say the problem with any episode we ever do is that there's usually 2 types of people who are listening to it. There's the people who really need to hear the advice and implement it, but then probably aren't. And then the people who don't necessarily need this advice, but are going to implement it.
Right.
So in this case, someone who's already training at kind of their maximum hours as hard as they can, they're already doing strength, they're already walking the dog, they're going to hear about this study and they're going to be like, you're right. I should also add in skiing and pickleball, and I'm going to take that dance class, and I'm going to they've now added another 10 hours of working out to their week because they heard about this study. Whereas then like the person who is maybe struggling a little bit to do this is going to be like, well, I'm walking and I picked up a weight like once 2 months ago. I think I'm good. Mm-hmm. So there's always the caveat of like, this is a very individual thing, and we are not suggesting that everyone go out and take a billion like hip hop aerobic jazzercise.
Yeah, and you could, but like any of this stuff is like start slow. So I think the walking is a great thing. And what we see is there's this concept of like people are not very active throughout the day except for their 1 hour of exercise. So they're doing a great job. They're getting over that 150 minutes of exercise. They're maybe training towards even an Ironman or something, right? But they do 1 hour of exercise and then they sit at a desk all day and then they come home and they watch TV. and they just don't do a lot, right? This is sort of like the modern lifestyle where there isn't a lot of activity through the day, which we know is like what historically, if we look way back, people were more active throughout the day, depending whether you go back to farming or like way back, right? Like humans were just like walking and hunting and doing all these things. So that's sort of the idea, is that like in modern life, you don't have to do a lot. We pay people to do our snow removal. So some of that stuff that's built in, and indeed the study we're talking about with longevity, it wasn't just bicycle riding with watts. It was gardening. It was going up and down stairs. Like they sort of included a whole spectrum of things, whether it was like what we consider sports, but also just things that are more than sitting on your butt watching TV. So housework, gardening, these types of things are included. So yes, gardening, great. Dog walking, great. Taking the stairs more often, great. Walking for your errands, right? These would be things that as a cyclist, we definitely should be including. And then race week, we can always pull out some of those things and don't take the stairs and that sort of thing. But most people were thinking about making life harder because life is pretty easy from a movement perspective. Life is very hard at the moment, and I apologize for all of that. But what I'm saying is like modern life is just much easier than it could be, right? So we want to think about ways we can make things harder for most people. And as Molly says, if you're already the person with a weighted vest running your husky dogs multiple times a day and doing 17 hours of training, like you don't have to do this. But the people who do, they're getting their 1 hour, we can start thinking about like, what are the other ways we can stretch our movement ability, our mobility? This is what Kelly and Juliet Starrett were talking about with their, what was their latest book?
Built to Move.
Built to Move. Fantastic book. And that was maintaining our mobility, not in just the sense of like the ready state and mobility WOD where we're stretching, but also thinking like, can I walk without pain? Can I run without pain? Can I ski without pain? Can I keep more of this like movement or mobility window, if you will, open so that we have more options, right? So for cyclists, I think strength training is like an obvious one to ease into to start with, right? The number of people, if you do side planks, it just will cripple someone, anything side to side motion, right? So again, they don't have the mobility, the access to those types of movements, where side to side pickleball would be like an explosive version of that, where someone can barely walk the next day or has to actually go to the hospital.
I was going to say, please be careful with pickleball. I think I probably said this when I was at the hospital getting x-rays after my Leadville mishap. There was a woman getting rolled in, and I heard the orderly is just like, another pickleball injury. So it's a problem.
So I'm trying to think of like some great examples. Like the thing that comes to mind now is like this, and I don't want to pick on Trainer Road. They do fantastic work.
Well, hang on, before we get to Trainer Road, like that's our like segue in a second here. I was going to say, how have you been? Because you just admitted that you've been spending a lot of time inside instead of being outside doing the skiing or a lot of the running. I mean, you've been running. It's not to say you haven't been.
I've had a few runs outdoors. Yeah.
How have you, like, what are the small things that you've been doing?
Well, so I have an athlete I work with who has a fantastic first name like myself. And so he actually sort of challenged me. I don't know if he challenged me directly, but he got into like Buddy Lee skipping, which is sort of random, but like jump roping. And I love jump roping.
Also fantastic taste in medical mediums. He's the only person that gets my Edgar Casey jokes. Shout out to him.
That's a deep cut. But so I've been skipping, actually. I got like a really fancy skipping rope that I probably shouldn't have purchased, but I did. And I've actually always liked skipping. Like in high school, we did like a bunch of jokes skipping. Like I don't know why we did it, but we just really got into skipping. So I was like, this
I love
really
that
cool.
As long as you pretend it's like a joke skipping thing, it's totally okay to have done as teenage boys. Like that convinced you that it was okay to be into double Dutch tournaments as long as you acted like you weren't taking it super seriously. But knowing you were taking it so seriously.
It was a weird time in the world, I guess. So anyhow, that's like something that you could warm up for strength with, or I even just sprinkle it through my biking. A lot of times I'll get off the trainer and do push-ups or something like that just to mix that up. I certainly use the treadmill both for hiking, so I'll change the gradient on the treadmill. A lot of people use treadmills and never change the gradient, so do things like that. And then certainly we have like our shoveling and our dog walking in there as well. So yeah, just trying to like mix that up. Like I shovel a whole lot extra, and I would be careful with that because shoveling is pretty dangerous actually. But just so the dog has a place to run around. Our dog's very small, so it adds a little bit of like it's completely makes no sense to shovel like our backyard basically for the dog to go out and play around, but he's outside, so I am outside keeping warm, and it's just like a bunch of extra weightlifting, basically, like throwing and trying to lift with good form and so forth.
Yeah, well, and I think you've actually also made more of an attempt to be down on the ground playing with him and doing kind of a bit of, I think people think that they have to do mobility in these very serious chunks. But I think we talk about it all the time, even just being able to crawl around on all fours and get low. And even when you're playing with the dog on the ground, you're doing basically like child's pose. And
well, you laugh at me all the time because I like roll all around and do somersaults, and
it's very silly.
But yeah, I think that's it, because like as a mountain biker, I end up doing a lot of somersaults explosively and unexpectedly. So I try and do that, and yeah, just like sitting on the ground is really, that's another Kelly and Juliet Starrett, is like try and get 30 minutes of sitting on the ground, and that could be on your last Zoom meeting of the day. Just like put it on the coffee table and frame yourself from chest up, and now you're gonna move around and do a bunch of what we might consider like hip mobility, because now you're sitting on the ground cross-legged or side sitting or long sitting or all the different variations of sitting. You're not going to do it for very long. You're going to move and go around because none of them are very comfortable, right? But that would be the idea, is like trying to build that into a busy day is, yeah, just like the call that you have. Everyone has a call during the day that like they do not have to be that active or that formal on, and that one could be done sitting on the ground, which isn't like, it's not even standing. We're not even talking about a standing desk here, which is another option.
Yeah. No, I really like that. It's funny, when I first saw this study earlier, I immediately thought I really want to get back to like Paula Abdul style, like get up and dance kind of cheesy like movements like that. That's actually the kind of stuff that I feel like would be very fun to get into. Do you want to start doing like dancercise with me in the garage?
Yeah. I mean, as a kin student, I have done most of those things.
I know you have.
But I mean, that would be the type of thing, if you are a dancing person, like that could be incorporated into your strength training, right? Like,
well, you keep yelling at me for not warming up.
Yes, that would be the thing. Like that could be part of your warm up, is like people will do hula hoops, and like a lot of these things that we do are not far off of dancing. So yeah, like get the tunes going and get warm. I think that's great. You see people do that even on the indoor trainer. I think like sitting up for a little bit, not for the entire ride, but like just periodic like shoulder mobility, which could look like a dance move for sure. That would be things to look at. Things like the rollers, for cycling, are often forgotten. Like we have multiple sets because people keep giving them to us, and I keep taking them because I'm like, these are the most fantastic things. So much better in so many ways, but also just there's a bit more mobility. Like think about the ranges of emotions and the actions and the things you have to do, let alone the awareness and the engagement. So things like that, where we're just thinking about like, what are the different ways that your brain has to think? And it's one of the most frustrating things, and I understand where it comes from, is just people say like, oh, just tell me what to do and I don't want to think. I just want the computer to take me through my workout. And it's just like, well, that's not the point of the workout, right? Like, and this gets us to our Trainer Road AI erg mode debate. And again, no shade on Trainer Road. They do what they do, and they have a market there. But that to me is just like, I love when someone says that they do that and I have to race them, because it's like, well, they haven't thought, and they haven't had to do like any like thinking about pacing or pushing like a little extra hard or backing off to preserve their effort.
Shifting. Yeah.
So I don't know. I think that's like the thing, is like what this cross-training study is saying to me is like, it's good to challenge your brain and to have to think and to have to learn and to be a beginner and just do these different things, right? Like I think that's what you're looking for, is someone who's like very like a consummate athlete, someone who can jump into different things. This is really what we were talking about when we started this idea.
Yes, as we careen towards our 10-year anniversary of this podcast.
Yeah, we're trying to think of things to do around the 10-year anniversary. So if you have ideas, let us know.
Yeah, this is a funny study to come up though, because we literally just started talking about this like a couple days ago. We're coming up on 10 years of doing this podcast, and then this study came out kind of like validating every reason that we started this podcast, which is very nice.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it doesn't, like the performance, maybe less so, but like I think just from like a good life, like I think that makes sense. Yeah. So the one thing was just sort of this Trainer Road, and people not with the, like what happens is okay, I need to put my data into Trainer Road. So what I see with people, I have a few people who have started with me even just this year, coming from that ecosystem. And so there's like a paralysis about having to make decisions about how hard to go. And we're just talking about, the zone is this wide. We've talked ad nauseum about zones. And so their moderate zone, their sweet spot zone is 200 to 220 watts. And they're used to being told to do 210 watts. But when it's an open, it's like, well, how do I choose? And like, what cadence, and like all these choices, right? But a lot of people who don't have that background and just have been doing intervals forever just would get in there and do it. And so this to me is like a decision-making thing, which then relates to performance. Performance is a lot of decisions. If you're in a road race, a cyclocross race, there's all these little things you have to do. When do you shift? What position are you in? How do you clear this thing? Where are you versus the other competitors, right? When do you attack? So these are the things that we want to have sprinkled into our training, these decision-making opportunities, right, to practice.
And Trainer Road just doesn't offer any place to add in workouts like a cross-training thing.
Well, I'm not that familiar. I'm sure they do. Like, I'm sure you can add outdoor workouts, but I think you are rewarded, and I feel this as well. Like, I want to finish all my routes in Training Peaks Virtual. Like, it's not specific to Trainer Road. It's just, you get in there, and it's very countable. I can see my kilojoules, how much work I did exactly because I have my power meter. Maybe if I go outdoors, suddenly I don't have my power meter, and I'm not going to cover the same amount of distance, and maybe it'll be a little more variable. So, I'm going to stay indoors versus go outdoors. Say it was warm outside, right? You see that all the time. Or like I saw the Trainer Road was like joking or something about like someone did a bit of a ride outdoors and then it like part of it was indoors and it just like didn't count the same or something like this, right? And so you get into these weird things where we're like trying to optimize to put things into now even this AI algorithm because it's more perfect. But then is it more perfect, right? That's the question. Is like if you went for a run at the end of your 90-minute bike ride, is that good? Do you enjoy running? Right? Like this would be the question is like, or should you sit on the trainer for 2 hours and then do you burn out in a couple of months versus the person who went out and did the outdoor run at the end of their workout? And is that person like, again, from this longevity study that we're sort of basing this episode off, like, are they actually better off because they had to switch over and start running and then make all the decisions that are involved with running outdoors and seeing nature and waving at people and all these little interactions we get by doing these other different things, right?
I'm just picturing like going from watching the screen on Trainer Road to then running outside, but you're still seeing it like it's a video game screen. And
I'm sure you were going to have your augmented meta glasses.
But like you're running past a person and you have like the two options pop up where it's like give them the finger or wave at them. Don't know why that came to mind. Sorry.
Yeah, I guess there could be like a keyboard shortcut for that.
That'd be like a GTA like secret.
Yeah, so I think just when you're doing these indoor things, you're following even a plan, I would say, has the same sort of rewards to finish it exactly as it's laid out. But a lot of times we can make these decisions to finish with a walk. A lot of times I'll do an hour and then we'll go for a walk right off the trainer. And so is it the exact same as if I burned another 30 minutes of watts on the train? No, it's exactly not. But it is still some cardiovascular training. I'm getting hip mobility. You and I it's our main talking time of the day where we get to talk through how are things going. It's time with the dog. Again, we get to wave at our neighbors and this sort of thing, right? So there's a lot of these things that we have to make decisions about. And just because one thing records watts or TSS does not mean that it's better in the end, right? Which is complicated, and I understand that, but that's hopefully the study again is getting at like there are like other things, other benefits of activity and varied activity.
Well, in some ways, this is why I really enjoy how I record my training in my like just Excel spreadsheet, because it does allow me to say, yeah, I just did a 90-minute ski and then a 6-mile run or whatever in there, and there's no red, yellow, green.
Right. And you don't really track load. And so I do think, like, I actually had someone the other day who was like, well, you don't track TSS? I'm like, well, I track TSS. Like, TSS is just training load. Like, it's intensity times time. But I don't plan the training based off of TSS, which some people would say is, like, old school, and I'm, like, missing out. And it's like, well, I understand how to do it. It's just, I don't think it's clear that that's the best way to do training. That's, like, what some people, I would say Training Peaks, like, wants you to try that. But it's not clear that putting those two things together, putting like intensity and time together into one metric is actually better. What we're probably better to do is what you're saying is like, how much time were you moving? Great. Now we have a simple metric that is an actual thing that you can measure is time moving. And then you can also do the mode, like the type, right? So the mode is the type of exercise you do, the variety. And so that would actually be like something you'd almost be better to do is like, how many different activities did I do across the week? For a lot of people, especially as you start skewing more towards health and longevity in your goals, probably that would be a better metric versus like, say, TSS or something like that that's jamming it all together.
For sure. And I mean, the caveat, like I do pretty well with doing that. It's not like I'm really longevity focused or that's my sole focus or anything. Mm-hmm. I perform
I would
pretty
say
well.
In a lot of ways, you run is the majority of your movement.
For sure. But just the way you just framed that is very much like that's the longevity side versus the performance. And I think it is very possible to have performance and just be a little chiller about how we're tracking.
Strikes me that it is a great argument, though, to do something like it's why CrossFit is great and very successful, and like CrossFit-esque things where one day you're doing rowing to warm up, the next day you're doing skipping to warm up. And so I think that's something that like even someone who rides the indoor trainer could be like borrowing from this, where like they do some what we would call active flexibility. So like lunges across the roadside or across the room, or on the spot on your yoga mat. You're doing some yoga to warm up is all we're saying, right? Like flowing through some motions, not holding your stretches, but active flexibility, movement preparation would be the words we'd call these. Leg swings, arm swings, these type of thing. So that's like a different type of activity that for 5 minutes you could do that, and then you could hop on to the trainer. But then, as we talked about, you could maybe hop off the trainer and do 10 minutes of push-ups here or there. Maybe like myself and my athlete that I work with, Pete, you could do some skipping or just jump off and do some pogo hops if you don't have the room or the ability to jump rope. So you could sort of sprinkle this variety idea, even in a very constrained, like I only have a small room that I ride my trainer in and I don't want to go outside. You could see how this could be like a much richer environment, right? Like there's more movements in there, right? If you had a plant, then you could get the gardening. If we were trying to check off activities, right? You could have gardening that you do during your 1 hour.
So water the plants, yeah.
Yeah, with your sweat or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
Is that weird?
I think that kills plants.
Oh, okay, that's weird.
Yeah, don't do that.
So one of the other clients that we've had over the years, they sort of burnt out a little bit on cycling. You know, and sometimes it can get a little much with how long cycling goes and even just the weight focus. So this person, you know, the energy availability, this type of thing. So I tried to guide them. They were sort of curious around martial arts or like things like that. They wanted to try some of that because it is very communal, a lot of these places, right? Where you can go to the gym and train, and there's a lot of skill and drilling there. And it's just a completely different world in a lot of cases, you know, depending on which one you end up in.
It is interesting because a lot of the mindset then crosses back over. I was just interviewing a coach who he's a cycling coach, but also like a second-degree black belt karate guy.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was super interesting hearing him kind of talk about the two and how the discipline and that kind of stuff all sort of relates. So I could see, I think there is a lot of crossover, even though on paper they look like totally different things.
Right, and that's so this. We talk about that all the time, where one of the benefits, if again we start thinking about training as this holistic or consummate athlete philosophy, where a lot of stuff transfers. There's discipline, mindset, sometimes the movement or the engine, right? If you have a good engine, Jeff Bush way back, early episode, said if you have endurance and a little bit of coordination, you can do a lot of things. And it's just like, yeah, like for sure. Like if you are a cyclist, you're going to do pretty well in trail running. You obviously have to develop some abilities around your frame, your body, taking the load. We all have been there where you get super sore and realize you can't run anymore. But if you ease into it, of course, as a cyclist, you understand endurance and pacing and probably fueling. But then I've talked about this, where my fueling and running, because it's much more difficult to digest, it's actually been something that I've actually found a huge improvement coming back to biking now, where I'm able to fuel more and I'm more cognizant of it. I've tried and sampled a lot more than I think I would have had I been doing just biking. I wouldn't have had the push to even like think about it and really push the fueling at all because of all the endurance stuff we've done together with running. Mm-hmm. So this athlete sort of burnt out on cycling. We've all been there. We all know friends, but then sometimes people just stop doing anything, which isn't a great option, right? Again, we want to keep doing movement. This is important. So this person ended up finding a martial art, and then they also ended up finding trail running, because I think inspired by Molly, actually, and like a lot of the stuff we were doing. So we've seen him now at a few of the runs, and he's signed up, and they keep growing, and he's going down that road, but has kept the martial arts in there too, and just has like this really rich, and then has actually come back and done a bit of cycling because he's feeling better. Confidence has improved. He's got a couple different communities in his life. And so now, but cycling isn't everything, right? So it changes the perspective on cycling, that like it's just for fun. Like it's not anything, like it's not the end of the world, right? And then you have these other places that you're doing things as well. So from that, to me, is like one of the biggest success cases of this like movement variety or consummate athlete thing, where it's like, yeah, as this different phases of life, whether that's time, injury, burnout, whatever, like you're over the sport, then you can just shift into these other things. It's not just the end of everything when we are only invested in cycling or something, right?
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So consider this your PSA to try something new, whether it's a martial art or pickleball, or you're going to turn on one of these old 90s dance with me kind of videos. They're all available on YouTube. You can look them up. They're hilarious. Highly recommend. Do a
Now,
TikTok dance with your kid. I don't know.
The other one we've seen a lot is that, and I don't know if we've sort of attracted these people or whatever, but definitely that like runners going to biking and bikers going to running and back and forth. And I think ultra being popular, like we don't certainly own the success of that at all. But a lot of the people who are maybe in 2020, they were sort of bike packing, doing the ultra FKT thing. Now they're seeing, oh, well, running, we can actually do a lot of this. And so that's obvious, like they eased into it and we've built some plans and again, gradually they're doing longer and longer stuff and enjoying that. But what I'm seeing the most is that it's a whole other group of friends that they're doing these things with, right? And so that to me is like the best part is that they have some running friends and they have some biking friends. And again, they can sort of bounce between those communities. And I do think that that's so important in this conversation when we're talking about health and longevity. So much of it is what we could call social or mental health or wellness that's coming from those movements. So it's not just the heart and lungs. It's also the mind, the self, the community, right?
100%.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else there? We've talked about a lot of these. We talked the 4 C's. We talked about the couple different client examples, athlete examples.
Well, I think your last note here that we should touch on before we wrap up is just, how do we know it's actually helping when we are performance focused? Because I do think a lot of our audience, they care about longevity. We all care about longevity, but we also want to do well in our races. So I do think we are still at a point where you have to convince people that this is in fact a good thing. So what are some of the things we can look at, especially if, as you say, Trainer Road is maybe not rewarding it. Even Training Peaks is maybe not rewarding some of that. Mm-hmm. So how do we know it's working?
Well, so the first thing is to say when we're getting we need to be on the bike where like our FTP isn't increasing or something like this. You need to also look at like, when do you need to be ready? When do we need to be specific? And then, so that's when, without fail, I will see that like there isn't actually like a clear, like what is the date, or like the plan they're following isn't actually like oriented towards that. There isn't perhaps an annual plan built towards it. There isn't like a count to when we need to be ready. Usually you see that last like maybe 8 weeks is when the specific phase, what you might call a build phase, when that usually happens. And so if you're thinking I'm getting ready for nationals in July or a stage race in July or a road race or a gravel race in July, then you can sort of step back and that's June and May. And it's like, oh, okay, it's January. This is like 7 months before July. So then the question would be, is it really that important for you to do 3 hours on the trainer in January every weekend, right? Not that you couldn't do that or shouldn't do that, but do you need to do that every day? And do you need to do it every week? Or is a 3-hour ski when the conditions are great with some friends? Is that a great thing to do in January and perhaps more beneficial? Especially because so many people burn out by the time we get to February or March or April before they even get a chance to be specific and to burn those matches. So what I'm really cognizant of is, are we the people doing the intervals in October and November that are going to burn us out? Are we the people logging the 7-hour trainer ride in January before we even get to the July event? Or are we the people that are really like tapering that out and having great variety across the week? Because if we're in January, the goal's in July, then we have time, right? And that would be the general preparation period, or what you probably call a base training phase as a cyclist. That's a lot of times what we call that. But I prefer that general preparation phase where we should be general. We're building our fitness generally. We're building our work capacity generally. And this would be the time that traditionally we do things like cross-country skiing, which, what are the benefits of cross-country skiing? Well, you're outdoors, number one. There's a big skill component, number two. But also it involves a lot of muscle mass, which cycling doesn't, and it more than running as well, where the heart, the lungs are challenged. If you've done cross-country skiing, it is super hard because so much muscle mass is moving. That's why you see the high VO2 maxes for the cross-country skiers. So when we talk about benefit, perhaps it's not as direct, as specific, as countable, but it's hard to say that it's not the correct thing to do in your general preparation phase if you have access to it, right? And if you don't, then we're doing these other things we're talking about where you're maybe doing a bit more strength training, cross training, other things as well as your indoor cycling.
I think that also gets to the not hanging your hat on that one metric to rule them all, right? I think we talked about this last week when we talked about FTP, and you literally had questions about it from clients even just in the last few days where it's all about the FTP. That is the one metric. Mm-hmm. And yes, cross training may not improve your FTP on the bike. I mean, it might, depending on where you're coming from. Mm-hmm. But I think we just need to go beyond the one metric to rule them all. Like, FTP is not going to win you a race. It is part of what's going to win you a race, but it is far from the be all end all of like what's going to get you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And when do you want that too, right? A lot of times people say, well, it was this in July when I was peaking or I was being specific, but right now it's a little lower.
Right. People think FTP is this steady.
Yeah, which it shouldn't be, right? Like all it's saying, like if we take it as the measure of your performance, then it probably shouldn't be at the peak. It should probably come down as you're not racing and pushing your limits so much.
Again, coming back to that, it stands for functional threshold power.
But just also remember, most of the time when I get questions about it, it hasn't either ever been tested or like hasn't recently been tested. So especially if you're using something like a Trainer Road or an AI driven or a model driven thing, and it's predicting, your Garmin watch is predicting, and you haven't maxed out for extended durations, like in a race where most people would be doing that, or a test would be a chance, but it seems like testing is not popular as much anymore. So it's just hard to use that. So you can say, okay, I'm just not going to test it because it's not the specific time of year and I'm going to just step back a bit from that. Or if you really want to know about it, then you're going to have to step up and do an assessment of this in some way to show the model, the AI, your AI god, to show them that like what the current ability is, right? Because it only knows what's fed into it. So this is the danger with that sort of thing. So I think the correct answer is that you can probably just estimate it and it's okay for it to be lower. But if you want to know for sure, then I think unfortunately you're going to have to test, even if the AI stuff says that you don't have to test anymore.
Yeah. I mean, all I'm saying is it's just not the only metric that you can improve. So if we just hang our hat only on FTP, then sure, cross-training probably isn't the thing.
Yeah.
But the point is, FTP is not the only thing when it comes to performance.
Mm-hmm. And so this would be like endurance or like the time you're doing sub-maximal intervals or something as well, right? So something like a tempo interval might not raise the FTP because, again, it's not a max effort for an extended duration. It's a sub-max effort for extended duration. But you could see your tempo going really well. So you're really grinding it out, and maybe you're a really tempo-based system that you're training with. And then, yeah, you're doing 90 minutes of tempo, which is a lot of tempo, and maybe it's going better and better and better. But then, again, your FTP setting, your estimate might not be changing because of that.
Oh, yeah, and even way beyond out of the zones entirely. Strength, you put on 5 pounds of muscle. Guess what? You're going to be a better, more durable cyclist. You work on your ankle mobility. Guess what? You're much less likely to snap your ankle when you crash. So there's a lot of less tangible to your zones, like inputs from cross training.
Mm-hmm. And when we think about consistency, right? Like someone might think like I consistently get on my bike for my 1 hour every week. But what we want to think is more the consistency across year and years, and that is really where the cross training, the variety is going to come in, because you're going to still be motivated and have energy and what Dan Cleather would call adaptive capacity. When I ask you to go hard in May and June and July into your July event, you're going to have the ability to do that. But if you've been slugging out some sort of interval thing on your indoor trainer and you've been pushing the limits of how long you can sit on that thing, and this is when I start seeing that it's like, oh, the last 45 minutes of this ride were just torture. And it's January and we're aiming for July. It's like, okay, like there's no, like you don't need to be on it that long. / we want to check on cooling and fueling and some of these variety things. Do you jump off and do some push-ups? Like, what are you doing while you're doing? Is it just an erg mode, or are you like doing the tour? We talked about this, I think, on the last podcast, but like there are ways to make it a little more entertaining and less boring, but everyone has their tolerance for it. And if you're at the end of your rope in January, then we know this is tough, right? So this would be a great time to be like, yeah, maybe just go out for like a boot hike or a snowshoe. Boot hiking is just hiking through the snow in your boots. I don't know why I call it boot hiking, but like you might be going through deep snow is the idea, right? So it's a little harder. But these would be things that then you could sprinkle in just to give yourself a break, because it's easier to do those workouts if you know, okay, tomorrow on Sunday, we're going to just go out and do a big long snowshoe. It's easier on Saturday to get in a couple hours with maybe some intervals and a really quality session. And those paired on a weekend are a fantastic weekend.
For sure. Okay, so if you are hearing this, you're into it, but you're not really sure where to go, you can always book a consult with Peter, chat through how cross-training could potentially fit into your plan. I will give ourselves a little plug that all of the Consummate Athlete like cycling plans and stuff do allow for cross-training. As we said, it's one of our key things. So if you are interested in training with more cross-training, definitely check out everything we have over at consummateathlete.com. And before we wrap up, quick thanks to our friends over at Payable for sponsoring this podcast. So Payable allows you to take payments within a Google form, making it one of the easiest ways to set up a payment system online if you're taking payments for school pizza day, team uniforms, club registration, whatever it is. Payable has your back, and we have a bunch of templates that can help you get started in like 10 minutes or less. Head to payableapps.com/athlete and see all of our favorite ones. All right, with that, happy training, and we will see you on here next week. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Consummate Athlete podcast. If you want to hear more training, racing, and endurance sport advice, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating and review. You can also subscribe to our newsletter at consummateathlete.com for a weekly dose of inspiration and advice straight to your inbox.